It's the year 1979. A patient named Damien died mysteriously in a mental institution, and his father, Dr. Garcia, who once worked at the asylum, asks help from a private investigator named Alice. In order to collect evidence for the case, Alice pretends to be mentally ill to infiltrate the mental institute. Dr. Garcia accompanies her to the hospital, but Alice asks him not to come so her mission will not be compromised. Alice admits herself to the facility as recommended by a certain Dr. Donadio. Dr. Perez interrogates Alice and learns that she hates her husband because he is a gold digger and wasted her money gambling. The doctor reads Dr. Donadio's report, and it says that Alice tried to kill her husband thrice through poisoning. Alice claims it is not true, and says that her husband conspired with Dr. Donadio to set her up. Because of this, the doctor concludes that she has paranoia. Moments later, Dr. Castell tours Alice through the facility and tells her some of the rules. When she is sent to her cell, Alice starts going through the evidence on Damien's death, which includes a note from the murderer. Flashback to the night on Damien's death, fire breaks out in the facility and the patients are rioting outside. The director of asylum, Dr. Samuel, learns that the facility was intentionally burned, and all the cells were unlocked. Moments later, they find the lifeless body of Damien. During breakfast, Alice gets to talk with a charming patient named Ignacio. They get interrupted when a patient they call Dwarf inappropriately touches Alice. Ignacio tries to chase him, but Dwarf is protected by a giant they call Elephant. The two go out to continue their conversation, and Alice notices the twins named Romulo and Remo. Ignacio says that they were born in the facility as their parents were also mentally ill. Among the two, Romulo resolves to violence if someone does not agree with him. Later that day, while Alice is interrogating other patients, Romulo starts attacking Elephant, but the big guy easily overpowers him. They are quickly stopped by the staff and Ignacio. Alice later gets assessed by Dr. Ariano, and she responds fluently, showcasing her high intelligence. Back to the night of the murder, the police find out that the murder weapon is a glass shard. The assailant broke in through the laundry room and opened the cells, causing a riot so he can cover his tracks. Recognizing the assailant as clever, the police interrogate the least handicapped patients. When they call Ignacio's name, he starts to panic and refuses to be taken. That is when the officer sees his bloodied hands. Ignacio says he tried to save Damien, that's why he got the blood in his hands. Moments later, the coroner arrives and says that she will be taking away the corpse. Alice managed to sneak into the archive room. She takes the record of patients who left the hospital after the murder, and one of them is Ignacio. Alice confronts him, and while showing the murderer's note, Alice asks if he was the one who sent it to Damien's father. It started to rain, and Ignacio begins to panic and run. It turns out that he has a severe hydrophobia or fear of water. Back to the night of murder, Ignacio gets cleared from suspicion because it was raining that night, and he couldn't have gotten near the glass shard since he is afraid of water. The police have done interrogating the patients except for one who has gone missing. The officer believes that it is their suspect. Since he is a new director, Samuel does not want a crime tied to the hospital and his name, so he asks the police superintendent's help to cover up the murder and make it appear that Damien just took his own life. Alice tells Ignacio that she is actually not insane. She is a private investigator trying to solve Damien's murder. She believes that the assailant must have been a former patient seeking revenge on Damien's father. Ignacio says that Damien had schizophrenia, and he always gets into fights, especially with the dwarf. Conveniently, it was Dwarf who went missing on the night of the murder. Alice sees the dwarf harassing a patient, so she goes to chase him, but as she reaches the woods, the dwarf jumps on her, making her unconscious. Alice later wakes up tied to a bed. Dr. Ariano says the dwarf is dead and she is the suspect, but Alice barely remembers what happened. After jumping on her, the dwarf starts touching Alice, and she fights back by hitting him with a stick. Dr. Samuel later arrives from his vacation, and Alice knows that he is aware of her mission because he and Dr. Garcia are friends. They also have exchanged letters before, and it was the director who instructed Alice how to infiltrate the hospital. However, Dr. Samuel is oblivious to her story and claims he never communicated with Alice or Dr. Garcia. Alice says she will call her client. She grabs the telephone, but it is not connected outside. Dr. Samuel says she is seriously ill, and this makes Alice mad and pushes him. She tries to escape the asylum, but the staff are able to catch and sedate her. 3 days later, Alice wakes up in a solitary confinement. Dr. Castell comes over and asks about Damien's files which she found in her cell. That is when Alice reveals her mission, to prove that Damien's death was a murder. The director and doctors later interrogate Alice. That is when she reveals that her stories were just made up. It is not true that she hates her husband and poisoned him. She only made that up so she could infiltrate the facility and do her investigation. Alice claims that Dr. Samuel knows this mission, but the director insists he does not. He says that Damien died in the facility by taking his own life. Alice narrates how she met Dr. Garcia. It was her husband who introduced her to the grieving father. Dr. Garcia firmly believes that his son never took his own life, especially that he received a note from the killer. Alice studied the case thoroughly and deduced that the killer who sent the note was given the permission to leave the hospital. That's the reason why Alice had to infiltrate the facility to check the records. Dr. Garcia hands Alice a letter from the facility's director, Dr. Samuel. The director instructed her to fake a mental illness called paranoia so she can enter the asylum. Alice then convinced their family doctor, Dr. Donadio, to sign a report that she is mentally ill. Before getting into the facility, Alice tells her husband that she will be away for a business trip. Dr. Samuel had enough, and he warns Alice that if she continues fabricating stories and manipulating the doctors, he will have to take drastic measures. Alice warns back that her husband will soon come looking for her, and he, Dr. Garcia, and Dr. Donadio will confirm her story. Dr. Samuel tells the doctors to treat Alice as a threat. However, Dr. Ariano and Castell disagree as they claim that Alice passed all the tests and has never caused trouble before the director came. Dr. Castell adds that she only accidentally killed the dwarf because of self-defense. They suggest confirming with Dr. Donadio or Dr. Garcia her story, but the director says there is no need for it. They just have to review Dr. Donadio's report to diagnose Alice. According to Donadio's report, Alice set up a surprise date for her husband and offered him a drink. Hours later, Alice's husband suddenly fell ill and eventually collapses. He survived the strange attack, and the medical report didn't find any illness in him. One night, Alice's husband suffered another attack hours after having dinner with her. Dr. Donadio turns up, and he noticed some symptoms of poisoning. Because of this, Alice's husband starts suspecting her, until one day, he found the bottle. He put some of it in her drink, and confirmed that it is indeed a poison. The husband shows the poison to Dr. Donadio, and Alice finds out that she has been caught. Afraid that she would get punished for it, Alice started breaking down and developed paranoia. This paranoia made her create a story that she is a private investigator who admitted herself to the facility to solve Damien's murder. Alice eventually believed her delusion as the reality. Despite his explanation, Dr. Ariano and Castell still want to confirm it with Alice's husband, Dr. Garcia, and Dr. Donadio. Later on, Ignacio comes up and says that he witnessed how the dwarf died. He claims that when he saw them, the dwarf tried running away, but he tripped and split his head open. The director says it is now settled and tells the officer that there will be no need for police intervention. Alice then talks to the officer and asks if he had already talked with her husband. Dr. Castell interrupts, saying that they weren't able to contact her husband. Dr. Donadio is out of the country and hasn't answered their telegram yet, so the only one left to confirm her story is Damien's father, Dr. Garcia. Alice tells them to ask Dr. Garcia to come over and put an end to this. That is when the director reveals that the man in front of her, the one she thinks is a police officer, is actually Damien's father, Mr. Garcia. Alice is baffled. She then claims that the man is not the one who hired her, but Dr. Castell confirms that he is Mr. Garcia, Damien's father. Alice is confused and claims that she is being set up, and so, the director calls the orderlies to take her away. She then gets harshly treated and taken to the cage, where the worst patients are locked up. Alice later has a dream, where it is revealed that the man who asked her help was actually a con man hired by her husband to pretend as Dr. Garcia. He tricked Alice into investigating his son's murder, a crime that never happened, making her appear crazy and get her locked up in the asylum. Alice tells Dr. Ariano and Castell about this and claims that her husband did this so he can get rid of her and keep her money at the same time. She believes that Dr. Donadio is also part of this. That's why he hasn't responded to their telegram. Alice says the director must be involved too, and Dr. Castell agrees, especially after seeing how he carried out harsh treatment for Alice. Dr. Ariano asks what proof does she have of these accusations, and Alice says that they need to check her bank account. If it is emptied, her husband must have run away with it. Dr. Castell sneaks to the director's office, and there she finds the $2 million payment from Alice's husband. She confronts the director about this, but Dr. Samuel denies that he was bribed and claims that he deposited the money to the facility's account. Meanwhile, Dr. Ariano goes to the police station to report Alice's situation and says that she wants to know her bank balance. However, the police won't help him without the permission of the mental institution's director. At the facility, Dr. Samuel learns that Alice is missing. The staff went looking for her, but to no avail. Alice was hiding in the workshop, and she asks the other patients help for her escape. That evening, she sets the workshop on fire while Ignacio sneaks out of his cell and opened all the other cells to cause a riot. Moments later, Ignacio finds out that one of the twins, Romulo, has been stabbed to death. He checks on him, and because of it, his hands got bloodied. The police are later called, and while the riot is ensuing outside, Alice heads to the gate. The coroner arrives to take out the corpse, and mistaking her as a staff, the coroner asks Alice to let her in. Alice starts to realize that everything that has been happening is exactly what happened during Damien's death. The fire, the riot, and a patient's death. The police have done interrogating the patients except for one who has gone missing. It is Alice, and they believe that she is their suspect. Moments later, they found the coroner who passed out inside her car. Alice attacked her and assumed her identity. They later find her examining Romulo's body. Alice claims that she knows who murdered him, and the director warns the officer not to believe her. Alice says that she has examined Romulo's injuries and found broken bones, which meant that his body was crushed by a heavy object. She reveals to the police that a patient called Dwarf died few weeks ago, and the officer asks why the director did not report it to the police. Dr. Samuel says Ignacio reported it as an accident, but Alice says Ignacio lied to protect her. When Dwarf attacked her, Romulo came to her rescue and accidentally killed the dwarf. She believes that the elephant saw this, and he wanted revenge for his friend since then. On the night of the riot, he attacked Romulo and crushed his body before stabbing him multiple times. To verify this, she tells them that Elephant's hand has a cut from the glass shard he used on Romulo. They go to check on Elephant, and seeing the cut on his hand, they confirmed Alice's story and take the murderer away. Alice tells the police that she is a private detective who was illegally detained in the mental hospital. The director says it is not true, but the officer says Dr. Ariano reported it earlier. They also checked her bank account, and it is true that Alice's husband took away her money. Dr. Castell then hands Dr. Samuel the letter she will send to the council to request his expulsion as the director. The next day, the doctors convene to discuss Alice's release. Dr. Castell says that their conclusion was that Alice was a victim of a plot orchestrated by her husband. However, the discharge has to be voted unanimously, and since Dr. Samuel is still the director, his vote will still count. But then, the director renounces his vote and lets the other doctors decide Alice's fate. They started voting, and the four of them declare Alice as mentally healthy. Dr. Samuel says that he is disgusted at how doctors were easily manipulated by an ill woman. He volunteers to resign immediately, and before he leaves, Dr. Samuel says he was able to contact Dr. Donadio, and he agreed to come over and clear everything up. Moments later, Dr. Donadio comes in, and it is no other than the man that Alice claims to be the con man who pretended to be Damien's father, their family doctor who accompanied her when she gets admitted to the facility. Did you like our movie recap? Please don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. To be updated for new movie recaps, hit the notification bell.